Copkit is a project funded by the Horizon 2020 European Programme for Research and Innovation, and is run by a consortium of 18 European organizations from 13 countries with different profiles and expertise, including industry, academia, research and technology organizations, and 8 law enforcement agencies. The project also counts on 2 external advisory boards, the Ethical and Societal Impact Advisory Board and the End Users and Stakeholder Advisory Board led by Europol. Next, please. Regarding the project concepts, it's worth mentioning that during a previous project focusing on strategic analysis for policing, the involved law enforcement agencies draw the conclusion that the strategic and investigative analysis are intrinsically dependent and that adequate exchange of knowledge between these different levels of analysis could improve their investigation and mitigation capabilities. They identified a gap in methodology and tools to enable the synergy between these levels of analysis. And this became the topic of Copkit. In Copkit, we are attempting to close the circle between the 2 aspects of analysis, and we are producing means for both types of analysts to produce and share knowledge. And we call this approach the early warning, early action-led policing. To achieve this main goal, the project has set 4 main objectives. Next, please. Objective 1 is focused on developing the methodological aspect of the early warning, early action-led policing, as well as producing requirements and approaches for the tools that are the enablers of this approach. And specifically, we have chosen firearms trafficking and crime as a service as the 2 application cases to demonstrate and evaluate our methodologies and tools. Next, please. As already stated, an important aspect of this methodology is the production of knowledge. Both types of analysts require tools helping them towards the production of knowledge. And this is true for all steps of the intelligence cycle, from data collection up to the construction of models supporting the assessment of the situation of a specific threat, which extends into forecasting for the estimation of future threats. Our objective 2 is about developing tools realizing capabilities for all these activities. Since this is, of course, very broad, we have focused on specific parts and specific data types, with a particular focus on techniques and tools that can benefit from the injection of domain knowledge by experts. Next, please. Our objective 3 is about making this methodology and tools usable given the actual constraints of law enforcement agencies. On one side, in this early warning, early action approach, analysts' workflows change and new interfaces are needed, allowing them to visualize and incorporate in an easy way additional information. Further, given that emphasis of this new approach on information and knowledge sharing, it seems obvious that security is a strong constraint, as it is also enabling law enforcement agencies to respect ethical, legal, and privacy constraints with respect to sharing. So we are working on the development of innovative solutions for technical infrastructure together with appropriate methodology and process in this regard. Finally, our objective 4 is about facilitating the uptake of our results by law enforcement agencies. For example, among other actions, we are working on an innovative way to allow the evaluation of the statistical performance of some of the tools on real data by law enforcement personnel at their site. And we are also working in the development of required training for analysts with different levels of expertise. And this was the introduction of our project. And now Agatha will start with the ethics, privacy, and responsibility by design topic of the webinar. Please, Agatha.
Thank you, Raquel. Welcome everyone from my side. I'm Agata Górzawska from Trilateral Research, and actually in Copkit project we have a strong representation of partners taking care of the ethical and legal and societal aspects in the project. So Trilateral Research is leading this work, and we're supported by two other partners, by Law and Internet Foundation with my colleagues Denisa Natanas, and also University of Granada, Javi, with us. We'll have now the part that we would like to explain how did we actually develop an approach to integrate ethical, legal, and societal concerns by design in the project. And we will all try to step-by-step explain you this methodology and approach that we used. I will give floor to my colleague Javi then now.
Thank you, Agatha. As Agatha said, I am Javier Valls from the University of Granada, and I'm going to focus on the challenge that we have in this project and the overview and objectives that we have tried to follow. Well, when we started this project, we had to face two main risks. One was the possibility that public trust in policy would be weaker and the social cohesion could be damaged. With this aim, at the early stage of this project, we detected some challenge. One is the possibility of have an inaccuracy, bias, and discrimination. Also, we deal with the data-driven policing that we have is one two slides forward. So as I was saying, we deal also that we are dealing with data-driven policing, and we have to face privacy issues. This is one of the main problems when we started, because this is true that when we started 3 years ago, we didn't have the same approach as we have already now. Not only because our research, but also because we have changed so quickly that we need to adapt in all the moment to what we are doing. So the third challenge that we have is when we use intelligent systems in policing, that implies mass and individualized surveillance. So when we try to fight criminal, organized crime and terrorism, we have to see and to watch how this phenomenon is working. That means that we need plenty of data. The fourth challenge is how we can build a system, and at the end we did, that could be transparent and have an accountability process to avoid the automatic decision making that could be a problem, how we can explain that and how it works. The fifth challenge is not to increase the actual issues by policing, because as we know, when we are working with a policy system, there are some, we can improve the work that they are already doing, and that is the idea. But this is true that already there are issues from the leaders when they are doing this policy. And finally, there is a mantra when we use an intelligent system that technology will have the solution for all of our problems. And in this case, we focus that Copkit is a tool that fight organized crime and terrorism, but had to be controlled by humans. So the last decision had to be taken by the human that is working with them. Then, with that challenge that we have found, we focus on our objectives and the overview of the project. And based in the approach that we have in this particular, with our particular role in Copkit, we try to ensure that technology development respect ethical problems and human rights. That is one of the main objectives that we have. And also, one of our objectives was to give support and advice to the technological and legal partners on the ethical, legal, and social impact of their actions, and collaborating with them to integrate this adverse impact. The final aim on this is to build a robust Copkit solution, what means that the system is legally competent, ethical acceptable, and socially desirable. Let's go to our third slide, that is what, from this stage of the project, the ethical and legal assessment team working hand by hand with the rest of the partners to sensitize research engineers to the fact that this is really important, and I think one of the goals that we have already gotten. The technological solution need to be fully legal requirement. That is really important that they follow the law. Thus, when they are developing some products that could be the Copkit tools, it's not ethical and socially neutral. So there are always problems when they are developing that, and we have to focus in this to avoid that this unneutrality it will be a problem. This is also that Copkit has ethical and social implications, and that is really important. And finally, that there be a responsibility with regard to this implication. But this is not enough in the ethical use of data mining policy. We have, looking forward for the research, we have to sensitize participant leaders about the challenge and implications of the potential application of such tools. Also raise the general level of understanding of technology, particularly for the end users. Vale? And some tools have such much problematic implication that they should simply not be developed. With this approach, I give the floor to Atanas, who will be starting how we develop this methodology.
Thank you very much, Javi. Hello, everyone. My name is Atanas Kirov. I'm a legal project expert in Law and Internet Foundation, and today, in the next few slides, I will present the governance of the ethical, legal, and societal aspects in the Copkit project. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, first, as you can see, the overall process is divided in two phases or stages. An external stage, which is done in front and with the assistance of subjects that are outside of the project consortium, and an internal stage, which is done mainly within the project partners. Okay, next one, please. Thank you. First, the external stage is done in two steps. The first step is done in front of the European Commission under the form of the ethics self-assessment check that was done prior to the submission of the project proposal, and within the project lifetimes, the annual ethical checks and audits. And the second stage was done with the assistance of the Ethical Societal Impact Advisory Board, which they provided their advice on the Copkit activities and with reviews on the relevant project reports. Okay, next slide. The second stage is the internal stage, and again, it is done in two steps. The first step is done within the ethical, legal, and privacy team of the Copkit project under the form of the requirements, ethical, legal, and societal requirements, and the impact assessment that was done for the project needs. And the second one was done in collaboration with all project partners, which includes partners with different professional background. This was done through various dialogue sessions, self-assessment, and during the implementation of the various ethical and legal requirements. Next one. Thank you. All of the above mentioned activities were done in an active collaboration with the project partners, the administrative and technical coordinators, in order to achieve compliance with the relevant legal and ethical framework of the European Union. Okay, that's all from me. Now, Agatha, back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move forward now to the details of how did we really do it in practice. So what was our approach and workflow? So the first note that I wanted to make is that we made the distinction between project internal ethical, legal, societal impacts and concerns, and the project external ethical, legal, societal impacts and concerns. So at the internal level, we're really focusing on the ELS issues that concern the research or innovation practice itself, so independently of the utilization of its results by society. So here we're really focusing on everything what's happening during the project, during the Copkit project, everything, all the activities related to our research innovation activities. So it can be related to research involving human participants, research ethics, but of course also use of data. And then we're looking also at the project external impacts and concerns. And here, ethical, legal, societal issues that we're focusing on concern possible consequences of the research or innovation practice for society. So here we're looking at everything, all impacts of the project that we can have after the project ends. So actually at the application of the Copkit solutions in practice, particularly by law enforcement agencies, so our end users. But of course, we also have to make note that the actual impacts really depend on the application by LIAs in real life. But our approach is a very holistic and systematic approach because we wanted to capture these different aspects of project and types of impacts. And ultimately, we conducted an integrated privacy, ethical, and social impact assessment of the Copkit ecosystem. From the methodological point of view, we applied different types of methods coming from value-sensitive design, ethical impact assessment, privacy impact assessment, human rights impact assessment, and societal impact assessment in order to integrate ethical, legal, and societal concerns by design. So our methodology is an iterative methodology that integrates conceptual, empirical, and technical investigations. And we try to build a common ground between ethics and technology by actually organizing and meeting different types of partners with different types of expertise, both the technical and non-technical worlds. And obviously, this is not an easy job. We use different types of languages. We have different knowledge background, but ultimately we have the same goal. We want to ensure that the technology that we develop is robust, is socially desirable, and ethically acceptable. So we applied an approach, and this is like a workflow that we work with. So in the first step, we built a relevant ethical and legal framework for Copkit. So we analyzed different types of legislation and regulations at the EU level, but also national level, and then we identified ethical legal requirements that we as partners in the project we need to fulfill. And we provided developed guidance as the ethical legal team in Copkit for our partners, technical partners, but also our law enforcement partners. And for this guidance, we try to raise awareness among partners. So what really needs to be done at every step. And then by implementing these steps, we also monitor the implementation of these steps and fulfillment of the requirements. And this was actually done not only by the ELP team, but we want to all the time emphasize that this is a very collaborative approach. We really need to be in the dialogue and constant collaboration between the ELP team, tech team, our law enforcement partners, and our ESIAPSO, Ethical and Societal Impact Advisory Board. And obviously, our project coordinators had all the time the oversight of all the activities because they need to keep, as we said, holistic and systematic approach between all parts of work. And ultimately, all these different steps leads to an integrated impact assessment of Copkit ecosystem. And as I said again, for this approach, we develop Copkit solutions that are technically acceptable and socially desirable. And also what is quite interesting to emphasize is that ethical legal work that we're doing in the project, we also have to be aware how innovation really works. And obviously, a technical project is a quite long project. Copkit is 3 years, and obviously what we know in the first month at the beginning of the project is different from what we know in, let's say, year 2 or year 3. So this phases of identifying the framework, identifying requirements, implementing the requirements, but also identifying potential risks, boosting also positive impacts, evaluating these different impacts, and obviously developing mitigation measures and implementing these mitigation measures, and of course enhancing also our tools and technologies. they go in phases. So it's not that we are only doing it at the beginning and at the end of the project. We're in constant collaboration dialogue with the project partners. So between the ELP team, between the tech partners, between the end users, of course, our ethics board as well, in order to adapt to technical development. So everything what's happening, what we know more, exactly what type of technology we're gonna develop, what our law enforcement participants really need, what is feasible, what is not feasible technically, but also legally and ethically. We need to constantly evaluate, monitor, and repeat the process over and over again. So this is very crucial that we had this, I would say, even culture of constant self-assessment of ethical, legal, societal issues that are really in line with the also process of innovation and research. And also from the practical point of view, we wanted to show you how we've done that. So we actually used touchpoint risk assessment table that was original developed by Trilateral Research. But for the purposes of the Copkit project, we actually adapted this tool. It's a very flexible and adaptive tool to have a very systematic and holistic monitoring system of first analyzing different types of technologies that we're developing in Copkit, identifying potential negative impacts and risks, but also positive aspects. How can we boost specific ethical, legal, societal values and principles? By identifying specific risks, for instance, we also wanted to evaluate how severe these risks and impacts might be, and what is the likelihood of them to occur. And also we identified mitigation measures for these different risks. And obviously we developed this risk and identified the risk and developed mitigation measures and implemented these mitigation measures together with our partners. And we, of course, try to figure out how this actually mitigation measures affect the risk. So whether, to what extent severity and likelihood were minimized. So now I will give the floor to Danica, who will tell you a little bit more about exactly the dialogue between the ELP team and the tech partners.
Hello, everyone. Hope you can hear me well and clear. This is Danica Kuzukharova speaking from Law and Internet Foundation, where I'm currently heading the Human Rights Department. And now I'm going to share a little bit more in terms of how the approach and the workflow that Agata just presented was in practice applied for the Copkit tools ecosystem while being in dialogue between us, the legal, ethical, and societal team, and the technical developers who are responsible for each of the Copkit components. So if we can go to the next slide, essentially, in practice, we applied this approach by structuring it in three distinct rounds, where during the first round, Agata, if you can show the magic, yes, during the first round, our team, meaning the ethical, legal, and privacy team, did assessment. We did an assessment on our own, taking into account the framework that we have established in the beginning of the project, but also building upon the knowledge and understanding that we grasped in terms of the tool development as an integral part of the Copkit, of the whole Copkit team. We have participated in dedicated Copkit events and demos, and we do know very well the Copkit components also from the ethics reviews that we execute for the technical deliverables. So to this end, we already got a very good idea in terms not only in terms of what the framework and the ethical, legal, and societal requirements are, but also in terms of the very nature of the technology that our technical partners are developing on the Copkit. And then, if we can switch to the next slide, then the assessment continued very much in this spirit of collaboration, just as Agatha presented before me, where the assessment was also taken to the next step, to where we entered the dialogue with the technical tool developers, who on their own, from their own side, also gave their insights in terms of what kind of ethical, legal, and societal considerations are there out there, so we can not only so we can integrate them in the design of the tools itself. So the assessment has been basically completed not only from us, from their side as well. But just because our project includes also envisaged the participation not only from the tech team and the ERP team, but also from our potential end users. So speaking, meaning the partner LEAs, they too provided their contributions and point of view when it came to the assessment. And last but not least, we did present our intermediate results with the members of our ethical societal external advisory board, so they can share their thoughts and we can take them into account when we complete the assessment. So Agatha, if you go to the next slide, please. So what kind of evaluation criteria we used for these dialogue sessions? What kind of requirements really informed the direction of the ethical, legal, and societal aspects evaluation? So first of all, the assessment was informed by very wide base of requirements stemming out of ethics, laws, and societal values. So first of all, because we are first and foremost a research project, so we managed to elicit requirements stemming out of research ethics, but also taking into account the specific context of our project Copkit. We took into account also the requirements that are relevant to the ethics of the application of artificial intelligence, but also police ethics and codes of conduct, because all of these different ethical frameworks in fact do play a role in terms of the potential actual use of the Copkit components. Then, of course, we took into account such requirements that are stipulated by law, and predominantly these requirements were related to fundamental rights. And last but not least, the evaluation criteria also were informed by the societal values that are widely accepted across the European Union. So we in turn have such products and results of the Copkit project that are socially desirable, as it was mentioned in the very beginning of today's session. And then there was a separate part of the assessment that took, let's say, a more formal approach following the requirements of Article 35 of the General Data Protection Regulation, meaning that we did an assessment first of all, some of the activities on some of the tools produced under the project would need to pass through a mandatory data protection impact assessment. So in order to do that, we had a two-step analysis. First of all, we did a threshold analysis, meaning that we analyzed whether a certain tool really does include all of the different processing activities that might potentially require a data protection impact assessment, but also we used other guidance and criteria offered by the Article 29 Working Party and the now European Data Protection Board in order really to have a more robust basis for the threshold analysis. And if a specific Copkit component from the ecosystem did pass the threshold analysis, the data protection impact assessment was carried out on the basis of how this tool relates to the principles for data processing that are as stipulated and as listed by the Article 5 of the General Data Protection Regulation. So Agatha, if you can take back the floor and just demonstrate how these dialogues actually took place and what are the intermediary feedback from our technical partners.
Fantastic, thanks, Danica. So we thought that perhaps it will be also very interesting to actually ask our technical partners, how did they perceive this process and what was their experience? So we have with us one of our technical partners, and it's Sven from AIT. Let's try if Sven, if everything works technically.
Yes,
Sven.
hello.
Great, okay,
Hello.
We can hear you. Fantastic.
Great.
Okay, so we prepared a couple of questions that we thought that might be worth for us to discuss. And first, Sven, I wanted to ask you, how was your experience working actually with the ELP team and ELP partners in the Copkit project?
Yeah, so I would say at the beginning, there was the formal side of the work where we had to get in contact with our data protection officer and the data protection agency in Austria. And to be honest, this felt a bit like a bureaucratic obligation at first, but at the same time, it definitely gave me a lot of insights into the aspects we needed to think about. Our intention was to work with real data downloaded from darknet markets, and we needed to explain exactly what we were aiming at and what aspects of the data we would be focusing on. This was a pure formal requirement, but it was an important part of helping developers getting awareness generally. So we worked with the legal, ethical, and privacy team from the very beginning of the project. And I remember especially one of the workshops in Esbjerg in Denmark, where we discussed requirements and use cases many times in the coffee breaks. And during this conference, we also discussed potential ethical issues in natural language processing, such as implicit bias or prejudices that underlie statistical language models. And this helped that we do not only think about solutions, but that we give significant room to possible implications as well.
I think, Sven, what you said about exactly talking on any occasion possible, it was very crucial for us because we also needed to learn from each other. And I think that we can't emphasize this enough, that we had to find a common ground, common language to talk about technology, but also from the ethical legal perspective. So I think that's a good, very, very good point. And Sven, I also wanted to ask you what do you think are the strengths of the approach that we took? So the integrated ethical legal societal impact assessment in the Copkit project.
Yeah, so I think the strength lied in the systematic approach that was taken. So we were directed through a process where we had to answer questions regarding the ethical, legal, and societal impact on the one side and the data protection impact on the other side. And I appreciated that additionally to providing information through the questionnaires, we had dialogue sessions, one in preparation before and one to discuss our answers and clarify doubts. And for me, especially, the discussions were most valuable.
Yeah, fantastic. And okay, there are definitely strengths, but we also know that there were challenges. And could you tell us a little bit more about your perspective on these challenges, exactly applying the ethical, legal, societal aspect by design?
Yes. So for the things we wanted to develop, we needed real-world data. But real-world darknet market data naturally includes a lot of private data. And it was practically impossible to get the concept of the data subjects. So the alternative was to look for publicly available data sets, but using publicly available data sets does not mean we can do with them what we want, especially it does not mean that they are non-discriminative or free of bias, if that's ever possible with real language data. So we took several measures like pseudonymizing the data and choosing our use cases in a way that we were able to avoid the use of personal data where it is not needed. And this is why we used primarily advertisements about weapons and drugs, where we, at least for the research topics we looked at, did not need to use personal data.
Oh, sorry. All right, and then Sven, we also thought that perhaps you could share your reflection on the process that we went through in Copkit, and do you have any thoughts on how this process or the ethical, legal, and societal integrating these aspects in the project by design, how they could be improved actually?
Yeah, well, first I think there were a lot of things that which needed to be done from scratch. So in my opinion, it would be good if for security-related projects of this kind, if there was a common approach to using data, methods, and technologies and being able to share them. Secondly, I would see a clear benefit in some kind of certified data sets, which would allow researchers and developers to safely use them for agreed upon purposes. I think this might minimize the risk of violating ethical or legal principles in our team involuntarily.
I think, Sven, that this point that you raise is very important, and perhaps it's not only relevant for Copkit actually, but also for other projects in the area of security. So I believe that it would be worth also for us to emphasize it as well as the project. Okay, we also thought that, so Sven was our tech developer, one of our tech developers, and he was responsible for developing one part of Copkit. But we also wanted to give you a broader view from our tech coordinator, Frank Minier, who is now with us. He's representing Thales, and Thales is technical coordinator in Copkit, so he has a very, very broad overview of everything that happened from the technical point of view in the project. So it would be great, Frank, if you could also share with us your perspective.
Thank you, Agatha. Indeed, as a next to technical partner, I'm also the technical coordinator, and as such, clearly I'm supposed to be the facilitator of the integrated ELP approach, and especially its inclusion in the design phase. And for that, it was an interesting experience for me as well. Maybe my first point would be about the necessary of cross-training between the ELP and technical team. It's been mentioned before, but this is important as the technical coordinator. The ELP team starts with principle. Technical partners tend to take principle as infrangible and absolute, or not take them at all, which is obviously not what we want. So for our ELP team, they're to make a lot of effort to guide the tech team in operationalizing this principle. Try to find concrete example. So during the research phase, both sides had to learn to take into account the maturity and the scope and where should things be put in the design. Conversely, the AI concept and vocabulary is necessary for the ELP team. So in the first year, I had many conversations with our ELP team to try to disentangle a bit those concepts, reasoning, learning model, and so on. And I think this was helpful, and this may be something that could be more generic for ELP team involved in such project, because I mean, actually, it is not specific to Copkit from that point of view. There was a big opener in our process for me, and it went as such. As a technical person, we tend to think as generic. A technology is generic. It can do many things. However, this is not really manageable from a privacy impact assessment. So what you need to come back is to come back to a concrete situation of a specific technique applied to a specific data set for a specific goal, and therefore for a specific risk benefit utility. And our ELP team was leading us towards this, and this was very important. And once we got to that point, then suddenly assessment, providing answers as a technical partner became possible. For this, sometimes we notice it helps to build attack scenario. However, this has a cost, so there's good balance to be found there. And finally, what we noticed is that it is sometimes very difficult to actually estimate threat and risk. So we should be a bit realistic about what we can expect there. Risk is progressive. There's no such thing as no risk, but a full threat analysis is obviously very costly. There are even some cases where it's disputable if you can estimate that risk at all. And I can take the example of the inference problem. So the inference problem would be, given non-sensitive information, what could somebody infer if they have access to additional data, whether prior knowledge from themselves or on the open web. Now, given the amount of data that's available on the open web at the moment, this can be quite a lot. But you cannot provide a risk just because you don't know what's available out there. And there's no way to know. It's unbound, and it evolves every day as there's more information available. So there you reach the case where, in fact, it is extremely difficult to provide an estimation of risk. So at that stage, I think we have to be reasonable. We can build a number of attack scenarios, but we have to limit ourselves to what would be reasonable there. The same is true for where you put things in the design in terms of access control, conservation of data, usage audit. There's a matter of balance between benefit and actual risk. That's it for me.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for all the thoughts. I think that's very useful for us, but I hope that our audience will also find these thoughts helpful for them.